Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the impeachment of President Donald Trump. And I know that the story can be a little confusing, so today I'm going to tell you some of the background, especially. And you're going to be learning about Donald Trump, some of his Democratic rivals, and a lot of things that happened in Ukraine. So hopefully by the time we're done, you'll understand it much better. Let's get started. In September 2019, reports surfaced in the media of an anonymous whistleblower complaint. According to the reports, a source within the government is saying that President Donald Trump had some sort of an inappropriate conversation with the president of Ukraine. Democrats are very interested in the whistleblower complaint, especially this man, Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff is a Democrat in the House of Representatives. He is the chairman of the House Intel Committee, and he leads the Democratic effort to investigate Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president. He goes on TV to say that he wants to know everything about the phone call. He also says he wants to bring the whistleblower to speak before Congress, so that the whistleblower can share all the information about the phone call. President Trump defends himself. He says he did nothing wrong. He says his phone call with the Ukrainian president was perfect. He says if anyone should be investigated, it's Democrat Joe Biden and not Trump. Adam Schiff and the Democrats, they disagree. They're very suspicious of the president. And Adam Schiff goes on TV again to say, if the president didn't do anything wrong, why doesn't he just release a transcript of the conversation? Now, it's important to know that presidents of the United States do not record their conversations with foreign leaders, but they do have some staff who listen to the conversation and then write down or transcribe everything that is said in the conversation. So Adam Schiff is demanding to see that transcript of Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president. Of course, it's highly unusual that any president would ever release such a transcript because presidents like to keep their phone conversations confidential, especially conversations with foreign leaders. But then President Trump surprises many people by releasing the transcript. So everyone gets to see what he discussed with the Ukrainian president. Let's take a look. We're just going to look at part of the transcript, the part that was most controversial. Trump says, "I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people. The server, they say Ukraine has it. There are a lot of things that went on. The whole situation, I think you're surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I would like you to get to the bottom of it. As you saw yesterday, that whole nonsense ended with a very poor performance by a man named Robert Mueller. An incompetent performance. But they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it, if that's possible." President Zelensky of Ukraine responds, "Yes, it is very important for me. For me as a president, it is very important, and we are open for any future cooperation. I also plan to surround myself with great people, and in addition to that investigation, I guarantee as the president of Ukraine that all the investigations will be done openly and candidly. That I can assure you." Trump responds, "Good, because I heard you had a prosecutor who was very good and he was shut down, and that's really unfair. A lot of people are talking about that, the way they shut your very good prosecutor down, and you had some very bad people involved. The former ambassador from the United States, the woman, was bad news, and the people she was dealing with in the Ukraine were bad news. So I just want to let you know that. The other thing, There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution. So if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. At this point, you might feel quite lost. You might not understand much of this conversation. You might be asking yourself, who's Joe Biden? Who's his son? What is CrowdStrike? Why are they talking about a server? Who's this prosecutor in Ukraine? Why does any of this matter? Why are they talking about it? And a lot of Americans, when they found out about this conversation, they were confused about a lot of the details too. And for us to understand it, we're going to have to look back at some things that happened in Ukraine going back years before this. So let's try to do our best and see what we can learn. This man was the president of Ukraine from 2010 until 2014. You don't need to know his name, but I do want you to know that Ukraine had serious corruption problems for many, many, many years. There were corruption problems in Ukraine before this man was the president, and there were corruption problems while he was president. In fact, in the year 2012, one accounting firm listed Ukraine as one of the 3 most countries in the world, alongside Colombia and Brazil. In 2013, this president started to make some pro-Russian moves that upset many Ukrainian citizens. This eventually led to protests, which led to clashes with police. There was a lot of civil unrest, and eventually protesters seized control of the Ukrainian capital, and things were so dangerous for the president that he fled. Eventually, the president ended up going into exile in Russia. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, he met with his security team. They discussed their plans to seize and annex Crimea. Crimea is a peninsula in the southern part of Ukraine, and the population there is a majority of ethnic Russians. And Russia made their move, and in March of 2014, Russia formally incorporated Crimea as part of the Russian Federation. Leaders of many countries called the annexation illegal, and they decided to punish Russia with economic sanctions. Meanwhile, things in Ukraine were really bad. There was a lot of chaos because they had just gotten rid of their president. They basically got rid of their government. They were in a really bad situation because they lost Crimea. Their economy was totally destabilized. They had to quickly organize to create a new government, and they didn't know what was going to happen next. So there were a lot of reasons to be concerned in Ukraine. At this time of great uncertainty, Ukraine is desperate for help, especially financial help. Barack Obama, president of the US, swoops in to offer help, and Ukraine accepts. Obama helps Ukraine, helps their transition government, and then, as soon as the people of Ukraine can elect their new president, the US is going to help him too. Now, of course, the United States isn't going to give help without some conditions. So Barack Obama basically says, we're going to give you a lot of money to help you rebuild your economy, to help you strengthen your military so you're not having to be so worried about Russia every day. And we're going to give you money for all the other things that you need money for. But we don't want that money to be wasted on things like corruption. So we're going to send some Americans to Ukraine to watch how you're spending the money, make sure you're spending it correctly, and especially to make sure that you're eliminating all of those old corruption problems in Ukraine. Obama says his point man in Ukraine, the the person in charge of making sure Ukraine is doing everything correctly will be the U.S. Vice President, Joe Biden. This is Joe Biden. This is his son, Hunter Biden. And this is Burisma, an energy company in Ukraine. At this point in our story, Burisma was already being investigated in Ukraine. Burisma has been accused of money laundering, of tax evasion, and of corruption. The company's owner had been a cabinet member in the old president's government, and he allegedly used that government position to obtain special licenses for his company. So keep all this in mind. In April, Joe Biden flies to Ukraine bearing millions of dollars in aid for the Ukrainian energy industry. The next month, Burisma hires Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. This is strange because Hunter Biden had no previous experience in Ukraine or even in the region. Furthermore, Burisma was an energy company that specialized in natural gas. Hunter Biden had no experience in energy or in natural gas. But Burisma puts him on their board of directors and begins paying him $83,000 a month. That's a lot of money. By the time Hunter Biden leaves this position, Burisma will have paid him more than $3 million. Now, why would Burisma pay such a generous salary to a foreigner with no relevant experience? This man is the Ukrainian prosecutor whose job is to investigate Burisma. Now remember, Hunter Biden is working for Burisma. He's on the board of directors. And this man, Viktor Shokin, is investigating Burisma. Now, in March of 2016, Joe Biden goes to Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, and he meets with this man, the Ukrainian president. And speaking privately, Joe Biden tells the president to fire the Ukrainian prosecutor, fire the man who's investigating Burisma. Furthermore, Joe Biden threatens that he will withhold $1 billion in U.S. financial assistance if the president doesn't fire this prosecutor. Biden says, "I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money." Biden's wish was granted, and Shokin, the prosecutor, was fired. Was this just a coincidence that Biden used his power to bring about the firing of the man who was investigating the company where his son worked? Some anti-Biden commentators will later say that Burisma probably hired Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, and paid him lots of money in the hopes that he would use his influence to persuade his father to push for the firing of this prosecutor. But of course, we can never know for sure if that's true or not. We can't know the motivations of Burisma when they hired Hunter Biden. But at the very least, Joe Biden had the appearance of a conflict of interest. At the same time as Joe Biden was supposed to be encouraging Ukraine to investigate and prosecute companies like Burisma, his son was receiving huge payments from Burisma. So, at the very least, this seems like a violation of federal ethics rules. You see, the U.S. Office of Government Ethics requires all U.S. government officials not only avoid conflicts of interest, but even to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. Government officials must avoid participation in any action or decision that could impact a close relative. Quote, this requirement to refrain from participating or recuse is designed to avoid the appearance of favoritism in government decision-making. Therefore, it seems that Joe Biden violated this ethics rule when he involved himself in a decision that affected his son, Hunter Biden. Anyway, we know for sure that the Ukrainian prosecutor was fired at Biden's request. So, this man becomes the new Ukrainian prosecutor. Like his predecessor, he has to meet with lots of U.S. officials. One of those officials is this woman, Marie Yovanovitch. She is the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. This Ukrainian prosecutor will later tell journalists about his first meeting with Ambassador Yovanovitch. He says that during the first meeting, the ambassador gave him a list of names of people whom he should not prosecute. This is quite a serious allegation against the ambassador, but of course, we can probably never know if it's true or not. Now let's move on from Ukraine and talk about events surrounding the 2016 U.S. presidential election. In 2016, the Democratic candidate for president is Hillary Clinton, and the Republican candidate is Donald Trump. Candidate Clinton is assisted by the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. The DNC is responsible for coordinating the fundraising and election strategies of Democratic candidates, including Hillary Clinton, as well as Democratic candidates who are running for Congress or for state and local offices. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is assisted by the RNC, the Republican National Committee, which serves the same purpose as the DNC, except for Trump and various Republican candidates. During the course of these campaigns, we can expect that each campaign will do some opposition research. It's common for the DNC or the RNC to do some research into their opponents, to dig up what we call dirt, to try to find some bad decisions or personal scandals in their opponent's past. Therefore, we can expect that the Clinton campaign and the DNC are going to try to dig up some dirt on Donald Trump and things that he and his associates have done in the past. That's all very common. But this particular election is a bit unusual. The DNC has a unique opportunity because the Democrats have a special relationship with Ukraine through the presidency of Barack Obama and through all of the government officials appointed by him. They've all been working together very closely, and Ukraine is very dependent on the Obama administration for their own financial well-being. So this is something that perhaps the DNC could take advantage of if anyone in Ukraine has information that could help them as they try to defeat Donald Trump. This is a Ukrainian-American woman named Alexandra Chalupa, and she was working for the DNC. She also had some connections to the Clintons because she had been working in the Bill Clinton White House when Bill Clinton was president. Of course, Bill Clinton is the husband of Hillary Clinton. So she has connections to the Clintons, and she's working for the DNC. And she goes to the Ukrainian embassy in the United States, and she meets with high-ranking Ukrainian officials. Chalupa and the Ukrainians, they work together to look for information that could hurt the Trump campaign. They're coordinating, they're working together. Chalupa is going back and forth with the DNC and the Hillary team and over to the Ukrainian officials. And they look for information regarding Trump or his associates, and they find some dirt on Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort had some ties with Russian oligarchs. He was connected to them going back since decades earlier. And the Ukrainians know about this because Paul Manafort had also done some work in Ukraine. So they research all of this and they share information with each other. And then they also talk to journalists, people in the press. So, what happens next? The press, they're constantly printing negative stories about Trump's campaign director, Paul Manafort, and this puts the Trump campaign in a negative light. So Trump eventually has to accept the resignation of his campaign director, Paul Manafort. And that happens less than 3 months before the presidential election. The Manafort scandal was an embarrassment for Trump, but it was just one incident. He could certainly survive that. And if the Democrats had additional ways to connect him to Russia, then the problem for Trump would be much greater. But just one person on his campaign working for Russia, that's not too much of a problem for Trump. Well, let's talk about what happened next. In 2016, still, a DNC server is hacked. A server of the Democratic National Committee is hacked. Emails stolen from the server are publicly released by WikiLeaks. These emails contain information that is embarrassing to Hillary Clinton as well as other Democratic Party politicians and DNC officials. But the question is, who hacked the emails and gave them to WikiLeaks? To find out the answer, the FBI offers to inspect the DNC server. The DNC declines this offer. Instead, the DNC hires a private cybersecurity company called CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike tells the public that they have examined the DNC server and found that the server was hacked by 2 groups associated with Russian intelligence. And they share their findings with the FBI. But CrowdStrike's credibility will eventually be attacked from several directions. First of all, CrowdStrike, while they are reporting on Russian attempts to influence the US election, will also report Russian hacking of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense. But their supposed source of this information disavows the report and says that CrowdStrike had never even contacted them. This damages CrowdStrike's reputation, and the company has to retract part of its report. Secondly, the founder of WikiLeaks says that CrowdStrike's report on the hacked DNC server is bogus. He says that DNC servers had many security holes and were hacked many times by several different individuals or groups. Therefore, even if the Russians did hack the DNC, CrowdStrike still wouldn't know whether WikiLeaks received the emails from Russia or from somebody else. At least that's what WikiLeaks says. A third credibility question emerges years later when private investigators looking into Hunter Biden's finances say that his employer, Burisma, was giving significant funding to CrowdStrike. Until Burisma's bank records are released to the public, we won't know if this accusation is true. But conspiracy theorists who believe this report see a money trail that connects CrowdStrike to both Burisma and the DNC. Remember that we already know the DNC paid CrowdStrike for their services. Finally, some conspiracy theorists on the internet will later make unproven claims that CrowdStrike has possession of the DNC server and is holding it in Ukraine where the FBI can never reach it and can never find out who really hacked into the server. There is no evidence for this particular claim, but Donald Trump may believe that it's a real possibility. Meanwhile, the DNC and the Clinton campaign still would like more information that could hurt Donald Trump. So they hire a research and intelligence firm named Fusion GPS. They hire Fusion GPS to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. Fusion GPS hires a man named Christopher Steele to lead this investigation. Steele is a retired spy who used to work for Britain's secret intelligence service, M16, and he specialized in Russia investigations while working for British intelligence. As a freelancer, he has experience working with the FBI. Steele writes a series of reports called the Steele Dossier. The dossier contains stories of misconduct by members of the Trump campaign and alleges that they engaged in conspiracy and cooperation with the Russian government to ensure that Trump could defeat Clinton in the 2016 election. Steele shares his dossier with the U.S. State Department, the FBI, and others. The FBI uses Steele's reports to apply for a warrant. They go to a special court to obtain a secret warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. The FBI's application contains several factual errors and omissions. Most notably, the FBI doesn't tell the court that their main source of information is working for the DNC and for the Clinton campaign. So his reporting is highly likely to be biased. They also don't mention that they've received warnings from the State Department about false information found in the Steele dossier. And most importantly, the FBI doesn't tell the court that they've received warnings that their central evidence coming from the dossier contains falsehoods created by agents of Russian intelligence. If they'd told the court about these things, then surely they wouldn't have been granted the warrant. But the FBI deceives the court, and the court issues the warrant, which allows the FBI to begin spying on the Trump campaign. The director of the CIA meets with a few of the most powerful members of Congress to tell them about information found in the Steele dossier. One of them is Democrat Adam Schiff. Someone at this meeting must have leaked information to the press because the media is soon reporting that U.S. officials have been receiving troubling reports about Moscow meetings between Russian officials and a member of the Trump campaign. But these stories don't attract much attention, as the news and social media are filled with many other complaints about Trump. In October 2016, at the final presidential debate, Hillary Clinton says that if Trump becomes president, he would be Putin's puppet. She says Putin is helping Trump because Putin, quote, has a very clear favorite in this race, end quote. Again, this comment doesn't receive much attention, as Trump faces many other criticisms, including other criticisms made by candidate Clinton. In November 2016, Trump is elected president. Later that month, the press begins reporting that Russia interfered in the U.S. elections. But there is a lot of uncertainty or confusion regarding exactly what Russia did. The heads of the FBI, the CIA, and national intelligence work together to create a report regarding Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election. This report, which they released to the public in January, says that Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign to affect the U.S. presidential election by harming Hillary Clinton's reputation and her chances of winning the election. Furthermore, the report states that Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for Donald Trump. Stories about Russian interference and rumors about Trump's connections to Russia become the top news stories in the U.S. Some prominent Democrats in Congress declare that Trump is not a legitimate president, and many more announce that they will boycott his inauguration ceremony. On the day that Trump is sworn into office, the top Washington newspaper runs a story with the headline, "The campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." Media outrage and public concerns regarding Russian interference and Trump's possible connections to Russia are so strong that investigations become a top concern for Democrats and are supported by congressional Republicans as well. Multiple investigations search for connections between Trump and his associates and Russia. These include the FBI investigation, a Senate investigation, and a House investigation. The Attorney General, who heads the Department of Justice, says he cannot fairly investigate the president since he, the Attorney General, worked on the Trump campaign. Therefore, he hires a special counsel, an independent investigator, to conduct a sweeping investigation. The special counsel investigation, led by former FBI Chief Robert Mueller, immediately becomes the most important investigation. Information and rumors related to this investigation dominate the headlines and the TV news reports almost every day. Any Trump achievement, large or small, is neglected by most of the press, as stories about Russia are their main focus. Many journalists, in their mad dash to be a part of history and be the first to report news that will end the Trump presidency, release information without taking the time to verify its accuracy. This results in scandalous story after story after story. But the serious allegations turn out to be fake news, and fake news. News organizations are constantly embarrassed and retract incorrect stories, and some journalists even get suspended or fired for embarrassing their employer. Democrats in Congress constantly suggest that Mueller seems to be getting very close to catching the president, and there is rampant media speculation that impeachment will begin as soon as Mueller completes his investigation. In the meantime, House Intel Committee member Adam Schiff, who is a part of the House Intel Committee's own investigation, says in a TV interview that he has seen secret evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. He says he can't go into the details, but hints that the public will learn about it by the time that the Trump investigation reaches its end. During this time, it is very difficult for Donald Trump to accomplish his legislative agenda, as the Democratic opposition hints that he may be a Russian puppet, and much of the public is worried about Trump's motivations. And it is difficult for Trump to promote his ideas publicly, as almost every interview or press conference quickly turns to questions about Russia. 2 years later, with investigations still ongoing, congressional elections are held. Republican control of the House is in question, as Democrats hope to gain the majority through the 2018 elections. Part of the Democratic pitch to voters is that Trump is a corrupt and dangerous ally of the Russians, and only the Democrats can stop him. Some candidates even promise that they are going to impeach Trump. When the votes are counted, Democrats win control of the House of Representatives. Finally, in March 2019, after 3 years of Trump-Russia investigations, Special Counsel Robert Mueller completes his report. Mueller indicted some Trump associates for various crimes, but he never found any evidence of collusion between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. This report is a huge disappointment for Democrats, as well as the many journalists who had stated with confidence that the Mueller report would expose a great conspiracy between Trump and the Russians. But leading Democrats in Congress are not ready to give up. They launch new investigations and request that they be given all the information collected by Mueller so that they can look for something that he may have missed. But the public interest in these investigations is greatly diminished after the Mueller report. Even many Democratic voters have given up hope that Trump can ever be impeached and want their Democratic representatives in Congress to focus on policies and legislation. Meanwhile, around this time, Ukraine is holding elections. You may remember this president who ran off to Russia. And then you may remember this Ukrainian president whose administration worked closely with Joe Biden and the Obama administration, and also assisted Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC when they were looking for information that could harm the Trump campaign in 2016. Well, by this time, this Ukrainian president has been accused of corruption, just like other Ukrainian presidents before him. He runs for re-election, but loses to this man. His name is Zelensky. He is an actor and comedian, but the Ukrainian people are so desperate to reduce corruption in their country that they elect someone who comes from outside of politics. On the day of Zelensky's win, Donald Trump calls to congratulate him. 3 months later, on July 25th, 2019, President Trump calls President Zelensky again. Little does Trump know that this conversation will become the most famous phone call of his entire life.